Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Welcome to our panel on our military, trans in the military. My name is Kathy Molig. She, her are my pronouns. I am the executive director and founder of Trans Family Support Services. We happen to be located in San Diego. We do serve trans individuals and their families all over the country. But because we're based in San Diego, we have such a large population of military individuals, military families here, that we have a lot of those families we have been serving for some time. So our tagline is Navigation for the Journey. We're just here to help the trans individuals and their families in any way that we can, from support to resources, referrals. We help with insurance issues, and we do advocating. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. But before we get too far into it, I want to bring on Jennifer Dane, who is the executive director of the Modern Military Association of America, and let her talk a little bit about the work that they do.
Thank you so much, Kathy. So my name is Jennifer Dane, and I am the executive director, like she said, of the Modern Military Association of America. Our nonprofit is the nation's largest LGBTQ military and veteran nonprofit that serves all spectrums of the military community, from the service member to the veteran to the families to caregivers, and even to allies. So we provide support services through education, advocacy, and support. And especially now, since the transgender military service ban was repealed, we've been really fighting hard for that. And so I'm super excited to be here to stand with Kathy and talk about these important issues.
And I'm so thrilled to announce that Trans Family Support Services has joined with American Military Association of America to partner to be able to bring the forces of our two organizations together to further that advocacy work on behalf of trans individuals and their family that are serving in our military. So if you think one of us is powerful because you're familiar with our work, then you know both of us together are just going to be that much more powerful, and hopefully give some people a real run for their money in order to be able to bring voice to the tables in the rooms that voice needs to be brought to. Do you want to add anything to that, Jen?
Yeah, so this is just an amazing partnership, because I think, like you said, it's just not just one of us, but two of us, and there's so many others that are out there that are behind us as well. So I am so excited. An interesting fact that most people don't know: Kathy and I met like several years ago at a Time to Thrive conference, and whenever I was not in this role or really in this space quite yet. So it's super exciting to see the transition of our friendship and this partnership from even a couple years ago.
I'm just going to say that watch out when two badass executive directing females get together, because we're going to be unstoppable is what I'm hoping. And with that, I want to bring on our panel for today. Enough from us. Let's hear from our amazing folks. So if our panel can join in, and then we'll have them all introduce themselves. So why don't we just start in the way you came on? Why don't you start us out, August?
Oh, great. I love starting things off. Hi, I'm August Ballou. I am a senior in high school at Canyon Crest Academy. I am a military child. My dad served 30 years in the United States Navy. And so I was a dependent for, how old am I? 17 of those years. I'm so sorry. I always forget. And so I'm kind of the dependent voice in this amazing panel of incredibly talented and honorable individuals. And I'm so happy to be here.
We're glad you're here. Veronica.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. I am Veronica Zeire. I was born in 1957, so I guess I'm the retiree this evening. I'm retired from the Army. I retired in 1999. I transitioned in 99 as well, and I moved out here to California in 01. I met Kathy. Gosh, Kathy, when did we meet? 2014, 2015?
Something like that.
And I was honored and privileged to be on the board of Trans Family Support Services for a number of years. and I am a board member emeritus. And it's a very, very good organization. Nobody works harder than Kathy Molik.
Thanks, Ronnie. Paulo.
Hi, I'm Paolo Batista. I'm a future enlistee, if you will. I'm in the process right now as we speak, ever since the ban dropped. Yay. I'm also on the board of Trans Family Support Services, and I've worked with both organizations, and I'm just happy to be here to speak on beyond part of multiple different parts of the community on also for Trans Family Support Services. Just love everything that this organization's about and does. So just happy to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you. We have one other member who's running a little bit late. So when our Chief Petty Officer gets here, we'll have him do introductions. But in the meantime, before we dive into the questions, which the questions were great that were submitted to the people previously that had registered. But Jennifer, if you can just share a little bit about what's going on, what the progress is, and then really specifically after you kind of give us an update, talk about the non-binary piece and the VA care, because those were really big questions that were asked multiple times. So let's answer those right up front.
Yeah, so these are great questions, and the one good thing is we're seeing forward progress, excellent progress about the LGBTQ community and specifically the trans community. It seems like the administration's finally listening and providing a space. So what we're seeing on the DoD side is obviously access to being able to be recruited into the armed services, but there's still some policy issues that we need to address. Although the ban was repealed, that doesn't mean it's perfect. We actually need to go back and really look at the policies and get them to a place that is inclusive care for all service members. And we're doing it based on, standard cares of practice that are, researched and really well done. We're doing this in a different way than I would have liked, I suppose. I would have really liked to have a policy bill go in today, but with the fear of people voting it down and voting, a ban back in place, we're going to work through the National Defense Authorization Act, which is going to be a bill that's coming up at the end of the year. But we are doing forward progress. We're making sure that research is backed behind for the DoD implementation. They did go back and reinstate the Carter memos that were there before. So there is some guidance about what that looks like for trans service, but it's not enough. We need to make sure that a trans ban does not happen again to anyone at any time just because of a tweet or something similar to that. So that's the progress that we're seeing on that side from the DoD. So we are making headway. It's not as fast as I would like, but it is going. But there is the opportunity to go in and enlist. And for those folks that are serving, we're making sure that we're getting the inclusive care that they need, and making sure that there's no discrimination that's being seen on any side. But as far as the VA, I can tell you with great excitement that the VA is changing so rapidly. But I know that there was a task force that was established, and yesterday they had to submit their findings. And specifically, they wanted to look at trans inclusive care. And one of those benchmarks was to remove the trans surgery exclusion from the VA, which is a huge win for us. We've been, this is one of our asks that we've been asking for a long time. Not saying it's promised, but that's what I've heard so far. A couple of days ago, I submitted a congressional testimony to just talk about trans care and what does this look like and it's specifically LGBTQ care, and making sure that not only are we collecting research and data points, but we're with a new implementation of it's called Cerner, or Cerner is the person or is the company doing the electronic health records. We're working with some of them to make sure that that if a person does transition, that they still have those reminders to say, you need to make sure that you're reminded about, maybe a mammogram if that's what you need to have, and it just doesn't switch your sex, but it also follows you and makes sure that you have all the care that you need along the way. So making sure that we're being really inclusive of what those needs are. And The report that I submitted was not just my own work, although I would like to take credit for it. I made sure that I reached out to voices. So I had over 20, not only were they clinicians, but I had 20 veterans that were voicing their concerns. We had statements in the testimony about what this really looks like. And so we're really seeing some really forward progress. And we're hoping that at every single VA we'll have a full-time LGBTQ care coordinator. And we're making sure that, the VA also has standard cares of practice and training and education around LGBTQ inclusive practices, because we know that's not happening everywhere. And then on the dependent side, because we do know that there are some families that have children that are LGBTQ and specifically trans kids. We are, like August, there is a program called the Exceptional Family Member Program, and some people are enrolled in it, and it makes it just easier for you to get the most inclusive care that you can. But there's a lot of muddled, it's really a mess about what it looks like for trans kids. It was designated for children with special needs, and they categorize trans kids in this. But there's also nothing that specifies. So say, for example, if a family gets moved to Alabama, where we know that there's some really terrible bills coming up in the state House and Senate, we know that, if they get stationed in Alabama, where the headquarters of the Space Force just moved to, their child should have access to as much care as they can, and there shouldn't be any discrimination that occurs with them either. So we want to make sure that we standardize this and make sure that not only are service members taken care of, veterans, their families, caregivers, and also the dependents or the children, because we know that all of those are so important. And in a generation, especially this one, Generation Z, which 1 in 6 kids are LGBTQ, there needs to be some forward progress. And so we are seeing it more so on the VA side, but there's definitely some hope to see it reflective on the DoD side as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that update. The trans youth care, the dependent care, is really what drove our partnership to start, because so many of our clients that have Tricare, their kids can't access care beyond the beginnings of maybe hormone replacement, especially things like surgeries. Partners can't access surgeries, and as you already said, veterans can't access. And for those that maybe need a wider view, like medical care for trans people is life-saving care. It is suicide prevention care. And so that's why we talk so much about it, because it's so vitally important. But there are other pieces that make it challenging. August, will you share a little bit about your experience? I remember a story about being like at a career fair and looking at possible career in the future, and what that looked like for you as the child of a lifer.
It was a college fair, which I recently just committed to a college, so go me. I'm gonna. But it was a college fair, and there were recruiters there from the Army and the Navy. And when I was younger, I wanted to be in the military, because you always want to be like your dad when you're a little kid. You think that he's a hero, and my dad he's a pretty cool dad. I will say he's a pretty cool guy. And I just wanted to be so much like him. And I had this whole plan about, I'm going to enlist when I'm 18, and I'm going to just have all these plans. And then as I got older, I realized, just as I grew up on Navy bases, how unrealistic and how harmful that would be for me. And it was very jarring, I guess, when that all settled in, when I saw, I guess it felt like looking down on an alternate reality almost, where I could go up there and say, I'm interested in enlisting, and that I would be able to do that. And that's not something that I was able to do with the trans military ban. And even though who I am has diverted from that course just because of how I've grown up, it still hurt. It was a definite feeling of displacement, and as if an opportunity that I could have has been shut away from me. And so it was an interesting feeling. But that is an experience. And even though I don't want to go into the military anymore, it is still an important conversation to have.
Absolutely, because there are many that do still want to join the military, many dependents that, they do want to follow in those footsteps of that parent and do those things. So it is really important. So Paolo, I'm going to throw this question to you. What do Jen just shared with us that like the policies are still kind of being written while the repeal was taken away. Even what was there before really wasn't as affirming and open as we would like. So what do you think new policies and guidelines for service members should look like? You've been in this wanting to enlist for how long? Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm kind of, let me say this first, being post, I transitioned over 11 years ago. Coming from such a long background, especially with 11 years ago transition medical, it was completely different than what it is today. I can't say half of my records exist anymore. We didn't have e-file or anything like that. So for me, coming in, it's a little bit of, I hope it's not a challenge. I hope it does change with the policy that's coming. My Navy recruiter recently just told me that they actually got the guidance, gratefully, on Friday or Thursday, Friday, and they were doing a session, a good deep session. And the great thing with her is she heard my questions that I needed of concern, with the policy. And it's great to have a recruiter like that to be able to question these things while they're learning to get the clarity. But for me, it's the background, right? So the current Obama policy, you need to meet certain standards off of a checklist medically. 18 months of stability with your primary, with surgeries, basically them saying, you're done with your surgeries, that you're not asking the government for anything per your transition. And my situation is, they also, with the military, want as much medical background as possible, right? With paperwork and everything else. So I'm hoping with this policy, if they're only asking for the 18 months of stability, that's all they're looking for as a requirement medically. I hope that, this is something they look at, because we're all on a different journey with our transition. Some transitioned 2 years ago, and then you got guys or individuals like me, or enlistees, should I say, like me, that could be coming in from transitioning way back. Trans youth today is transitioning earlier than I could imagine. And I hope that gets to change, because I don't want that to be a situation. Not everybody wants to join right after high school. Look at me, 36 years old. Youth transitions at 6. Why would you need over 26 years or 20 years of medical for a condition or being trans, which isn't a medical condition, right? I can see if you had you get a shoulder surgery, they just want a waiver stating that surgery is good and clear. That's all they need. They don't need 10 years of what has that surgery been the last 10 years. So that's kind of one of the things I really hope they pay attention to, because we're not a medical condition. Being trans is not something that can prevent us from doing our job. And that's the one thing I want clarity on. And it's the same as, Jen was talking about. This needs to be secured. Yes, this is an executive order, but this policy, the new one that's coming, clarity was going to have to happen over time. With 4 years ahead of us to really clarify everything, I really think it's going to make a difference, because we can put forth, well, let's clarify this area now. We've got people currently in, we've put them through the process of enlisting. This is what we see, what was needed or what was necessary, what wasn't necessary. So I really think the next 4 years is going to be a big deal with the policy. There's going to be amendments, I'm sure. It's a learning process. It really is. And in the end, I just see great things coming no matter what, especially with organizations like yours, Kathy, and Modern. You guys are doing tremendous work. And it means so much on my back. Like, I feel you guys back here just holding on, telling us it's going to be all right, you know? So I'm
Thanks,
ready.
Paulo. I think one of the things that you said, if you could just mute your mic, maybe, Paulo. I think one of the things that's really important to recognize is the advancement of general knowledge, the advancement of societal's acceptance, the advancement of society's understanding, right? So I have a son who transitioned almost a decade ago, and when I look back to just how the world was when he first started his transition, the majority of people didn't even know what the word transgender meant, right? People we were interacting with. And so, you know, this piece of all the time where folks are getting more educated. Right now, we have 19 different states that have anti-trans state legislation going on. And that is bringing more education to more people. You know, as we don't want the trans bills to be there, but it's helping people to have better understanding. And that piece, I think, overall is helpful. But in particular, people who are in positions of making decisions and the people who have power and really having that piece of understanding to it. So, Veronica, we're gonna move to you. You can feel free to share a little bit more about like what your experience was, but then the question is, how do you feel open trans service impacts the general transgender community in America?
Number one, it legitimizes us. There's nothing like being able to do a military job and to do it well and to do it in a sterling manner to convince people that these people are for real. It also, there's also a cultural thing that is at play here in that you have military units and you have people from all over the country thrown into situations together, okay, where they have to accomplish one mission, okay, and they have to learn how to trust each other. They have to learn how to communicate to each other, and part of that is there are two things in every Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, Space Force unit that need to be listened to and need to be accepted by every single soldier, sailor, airman, Marine. And that is trust and respect. You need to trust the individual next to you, and you also need to respect their abilities and whether or not they're going to be able to do the job. And you do that through your day-to-day contacts, and you do that through your collective training and individual trainings. So what Open Trans Service is going to do for the transgender community, it's going to be a big legitimizer, because you're going to have, I was raised on a farm, and I was thrown in boot camp. I was thrown into a room with a bunch of guys from inner city Detroit. I mean, I was some hayseed. They kept talking about this guy named Holmes, and I said, "Who's this guy Holmes you keep talking about?" And they just laughed, and then they told me, and I said, "Oh, duh." But what you've got is you're going to have that legitimization that happens, and that right there is going to pay off big dividends for the eventual, I would hope to say, uniform acceptance of trans people.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ronnie. And for those of you watching, feel free to put some questions in. We can see them. We're going to try and integrate them as we kind of go through this. But I want to go back to you, Jen, and just maybe hone in on that question a little bit more, because several people had asked, what does all this repealing the trans piece mean for folks who identify as non-binary in the military?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because this is a question that I don't think we've ever really, we've never even thought about really until now. So we're getting to a place where we're actually being able to I don't really want to openly talk about it quite yet with the legislators, but I want to make it like that we make policies that are so inclusive to gender non-binary, gender diverse, gender expansive folks more, and find a way that we can not only create policies that are inclusive for trans folks, but lay the foundation for the further policies that are laid out that will be, so it'll be easier for whenever the next step comes, because I feel like that this is going to be the next step is for those individuals. And what that means is really looking at, I mean, one of my legislative priorities was also to change the culture within, with not only internal to the DoD and VA, but also external. Like, what does this mean whenever we see representation of ourselves on screens, or what happens when we humanize these experiences? And there's like wonderful people that are currently serving. One of my really good friends, Tech Sergeant Jamie Hash, is a great example of somebody who was able to, you know, not only was she transitioned, and I mean, she had to go through the trans ban too, and then came out on the other side and did it successfully. And so examples like that are existing, and I know we'll talk to another panelist about what it looks like in the service. But I think that for me, I'm very much, how I think as an executive director is very much like a game of chess. So I think not only are we inclusive to the trans community, but also looking forward to whenever I make recommendations to folks, what does this really mean to the next generation of gender non-binary, gender, like all the umbrella, because I think that's the next wave, and we got to make sure that this is culturally acceptable. And I think we're getting there, especially like I think we're seeing more media representation and more folks are coming out and being humanized, and I think that's a really good strategy. So that's at least my goal, is to make sure that we do this very intentional, and that we're making enough policies that are really good policies, but also strategic for the expansion of that service in the future.
Awesome. Being, you know, the big thing that I can say is being inclusive for one community makes us inclusive for all communities, right? And so looking at things like policies from a lens of, is this including all people, not just one category of people? So thank you for that. So Jesse, welcome. We're so glad you were able to make it. If you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself, give us a couple of minutes about you, and then I would really like for you to share what it's been like as an out, open trans person who's still in the military even after the ban, and how that's been for you.
Absolutely, 100%. I apologize for running a little bit late. Life was happening, caused me to be a little bit late. So I'm Jesse Pullen. I'm a chief in the United States Navy. I've been active duty for 11 years, just over 11 years. Originally from Texas, I'm currently stationed in Seattle, Washington. So
Oh, I think we lost Jesse for a minute there. We'll circle back around. Jesse's having a little bit of a challenge today, but we'll come back to that. So, Ronnie, maybe you can answer this one. For retirees and reservists, has there been issues, anything with post-transition recall? The question says, by that, I mean transitioning after active service and being called back with your new gender. Do you have any experience? Or I know you're part of a very large group of active and retiree service members that are trans. What can you share with us?
What I can share two anecdotes. One that happened to me personally, and one I heard came from somewhere else. But during the Gulf War in 1991, there was a special need for for an Air Force pilot to pilot some sort of plane, and I heard that they were called back because they needed to stand up a unit once again. Stand up is a military term for basically getting it up and getting it ready. For me, I retired in 1999, and of course, the the war on terror started in 2001. And in 05, here I am, I'm working my job hat here in California, and I get a couple of messages, couple of emails from the US Army, and they say they want to bring me back on. They're standing up a couple of armor battalions because of the occupation of Iraq that was going on, and they needed operations officers, and I fit the bill. And they said, "Are you interested?" And I said to myself, I said, "Of course I'm interested. I mean, it's what I trained for. It's what I'm really ready for." But had I gone in that then, I would have been discharged because I would have been violating the policy of don't ask, don't tell. So what I want to say is that back then, between the years of 90 and 2012, when the policy don't ask, don't tell, I believe was actually lifted, it seemed like there was a little bit of give and take that the military would do. For me, because there were so many other officers with the skill qualification that I had, they could have found somebody else, and they eventually did. But for a very, very specific, specialized task, they probably would kind of look the other way. At least that's what I've heard. I don't know that for certain, though.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's so many questions of what might happen, and policy is still being hashed out, as Jen talked about, and not everybody gets the full message, right? So what might happen in one place isn't the same in another, and I see that even just in the medical care within Tricare and the VA and such. And August, is there something that you can share with us as a young trans individual of a service person? What would you like to see happen as far as support for families that have trans individuals?
Pardon me if you hear my dog in the background. I'm sorry about that. I would definitely like to see a lot more support, at least in the community that you see on Navy bases. Because when I had first come out, I felt incredibly isolated. There is an intense amount of stigma around the LGBTQ community within the military environment, and it can feel very stifling. If I had even something like a support group, like a mini GSA, a little military GSA, if you will, I feel like it would have been a lot easier for me to be accepting of myself, and to have that support would be phenomenal. It would have made my life so much better. So even something like a community center where young trans youth and trans members of the military can get together and even just talk. Something as simple as that, just being seen and feeling as if we are part of that community instead of being ostracized from it, is something that is so incredibly important, and something that I wish I would see more of in military environments, because it is incredibly, I'd say, life-saving. It's life-saving. It is. And so to see that would be great.
Absolutely, it's life-saving. Yeah, we talk in terms of suicide prevention for folks who maybe don't know all the numbers. You're not familiar with trans youth, but across the country, trans youth have a 47% suicide attempt rate. And so what we do know is the Trevor Project has put out research that by having one affirming adult in that youth's life, that reduces that by 40%. So if that one adult maybe can't be the parents, maybe they're not there yet, they're not affirming yet, but you could find somebody else within the military system, within that system of support, certainly is life-saving information. So Paolo, I know we have some prospective service people listening today. We have some questions about that. When somebody says, but really, is it worth it for me to do this? I want to, but really, should I? I mean, I've known you a long time and I've known you fought for this for a long time. So what would you say to someone else who's considering?
Yeah. You know, for me, this is more than a job. Um, it comes from a little background that, you know, I have an adoptive brother who made a career out of the Air Force for 20 years. He retired, and my dad adopted him, and we don't really know each other too well, but you know, the impact that I seen and the great leadership that my dad would tell me about him, it pushed my dad. And you know, he showed me the ROTC back in high school. Not to share my age or show it. Age is just a number, by the way. I got my 9-minute mile. We're good. It's just the respect that I saw. He put me through ROTC, and it changed my mind. I hadn't transitioned then yet, but I was still LGBTQ then. So that was still a challenge in its own. And what I had to go through then, it kind of just made me sort of ready for today. What I seen in the brotherhood and the familyhood and the sisterhood and just the fellowship that the ROTC had, and the instructors of those courses, that who we identified as while we were in those classes, it didn't matter. Again, it was the jobs. We were all still given different jobs during the staff, the units, the platoons. It was an Army ROTC. It was still about what we could bring to the table, not how we identified or what we, you know, showed in the teamwork that we brought together to make what happened. You know, we went to competitions, platoon drills, everything else, and it just set me forward that this is what I want to do. And for me at the time, right after high school, I was put in a different life predicament. Life happens, right? My dad got super sick, and I had to make a choice. And at that time, I also made the choice for myself when he, you know, ultimately passed away, unfortunately, that I needed to live authentically. And that's what came first. Military, I felt times were changing, things were going to change. At that time, we had a presidency that was telling us different things and going, you know, supporting the LGBT community. And he did make changes. Unfortunately, when I was ready to join, it was a little too late, and there was another impact by a different presidency. And but it still didn't stop the love that I have. If you have a love to serve your country, then you should do it. We are in the state right now where things are changing so we can without being stopped. Like I said, there's going to be speed bumps, but as long as we're here and you know that you're going to go in as the person you're meant to be, you're giving to the country something that it needs. I just say do it. I'm doing it at the age of 36 because I still have a love for it. And now I get to do it with the love that I have for myself, which means I can bring more to the table than I could before. I can't say that, you know, that's how a lot of new current enlistees want to be. It's just you're free for yourself to give more to your country and the fellow men and the brotherhood, the sisterhood, everybody around you. So don't be afraid. Follow your heart, follow your dream. If this is what is in your heart to do, then do it. God, do it. Even if the presidency wasn't going to change, I was still going to battle, because it's not about that. It was about what I wanted to do, and it's to serve my country, and that was it. So
Thanks, Paula. We appreciate watching you fight for that, and watching you really stand true to what's in your heart. Veronica, you wanted to add something to that.
I wanted to add that you never know what you're capable of until you're absolutely exhausted. You've been in the field for 2.5 weeks on a field exercise. You don't think that there's any more you can do. And then somewhere deep inside of you, you find out what exactly you can do. And you find that wealth of reserve energy, patience, understanding of yourself. And I like to say that American troops will give you everything they have until they are spent, and then they'll give you more. And I think that comes from the training that the military gives you, basically the bucking up. that happens when you do join, because all of a sudden you think that, well, I can't do that job, and then you turn around and you do that job, and what does that do for the young person? The thing that always chokes me up is when I remember soldiers after 3 weeks of heavy engagements, they still have that energy, a reserve in them to realize the next mission and to accomplish that mission. And that only comes from trust and respect in, number one, yourself, and number two, your unit. The other thing is I just want to echo what Paula said, is that you have to be devoted to this country. And this country has some pretty serious challenges that are currently happening and that will happen in the next few years. And it's going to require, it could very easily require every single citizen to do something in order to protect this democracy. This democracy can be overturned. This democracy can be eradicated from the face of the earth. And as far as I'm concerned, if I'm still alive and I'm still able to do something about it, I'm going to fight like hell to keep it. It's up to you.
Yeah, that exemplifies that love of country for sure, that I know runs throughout everybody here. So Jesse, you're back with us. So I'm gonna turn it over to you for a couple of minutes. You can fill us in again on who you are and a little bit of your story. And then several people wanted to know, what can veterans and also the civilian individuals do to support trans people who are already in the military?
All right, thank you. Yeah, sorry about that bad connection. So I'm Jesse Pullen. I'm a chief of the United States Navy. I've been active duty for 11 years now. So I came in 2009, so that was pre even Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So that had its own challenges in and of itself. I started my transition in early 2017, and that, if everyone remembers, summer of 2017 is when the tweet went out that transgender folks will not serve in any capacity. So that kind of lit a fire under me to get the transition process going and going as quickly as possible. Because I could see the storm that was coming on the horizon for that. So I was lucky enough to continue on with my transition through that entire time. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was grandfathered in, which I hate using that term, because it feels like just because I was in that one little window, that life was a little bit easier for me than some of my other trans brothers and sisters, as far as getting medical treatment that we need. To answer the question about what veterans and civilian folks can do, is I would just get to know trans military folks, create a bond with, get to know, hear their stories. I'm sure it's been talked about. The more that our stories are out there and people understand what we've gone through, I feel like that in itself just gives support to military folks. Where we're at now, and policies are in place that we are getting medical care we need. I would say that the process, learning the process and having folks know the process to help us through it, is the only thing that probably a little bit of work on. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. So there's a couple of comments that we're getting through the different feeds. Jen, we talked a little bit about Tricare in the beginning, and in particular around dependence. I loved your analogy of doing this work is like playing a chess game. And I know in my advocacy work, that, you know, institutions in and of themselves take a long time for change. This will be my first real work in advocacy with you in military, but I'm assuming we're talking the same kind of thing, that it's going to take time. So we are working our way towards that piece with Tricare. But can you address the question about the guidance around, if you know anything or have plans of what you're working on, guidance around the school policies for our trans students? Based on just a little history, the Obama administration had guidance around trans and non-binary individuals using restrooms that aligned with their gender identity in schools, and that was followed. And then the past administration rescinded those guidelines and went back to using restrooms in schools and on military bases based on the sex assigned at birth. And so what's the plan for now?
Yeah, those are great questions, and I wish I had more answers for you. But the one good thing that I can say about this is there hasn't been very much guidance or revision for the bathroom policies quite yet. I say that quite yet. So I know that some of you all are aware, but Dr. Jill Biden did reinstate joining forces with the focus of military families, and so in a couple of weeks, I and my colleagues have a meeting with her about not only about military LGBTQ military families, but specifically the Exceptional Family Member program. But this is one of the key things that I want to bring up too is, you know, saying that, you know, it's a bathroom. Goodness, just let the bathroom, just let them use the restroom. Because I think that we get caught up with this and just let them be able to use the restroom of that they need to go to. So this is going to be one thing. I mean, I think it's like a no nonsense policy that can be implemented tomorrow, or it should today, really. So making sure that we not only like put this guidance, but make sure that, you know, the education secretary, you know, we also sit down with them and say, like, this is what needs to be done, and make sure that their day of schools are taken care of across the board, because it needs to be inclusive to all folks. Especially all the LGBTQ folks or minority populations, and we're seeing that across the board is not happening in education specifically. Another one that they ask is, I mean, I'll go down because I see some of the questions, but it's about the Tricare coverage. So one good thing that with our partnership, Kathy and I, this is one of the biggest things we've talked about is how do we figure out Tricare for dependents? And what this really means is making sure that we go to Tricare and advocate and say this issue needs to be taken care of when the military dependent is a child, because not only is it going to cost less because we're doing really inclusive care and really informative care that goes along with the standard care of practice. But if we can do this at the front end and prevent a lot of harm and trauma, it costs less on the back end, because these children need it and they should have these surgeries. Or any care really. Some of the asks that we're making are just to let kids be seen on the base, because we know that some are just denied of any basic health care, which is unconscionable. They should be allowed to access it, because when the transgender service ban was put into place by Trump, it had nothing to do with trans kids. But what happened is we saw it had everything to do with trans kids, and they were discriminated against simply for being themselves. And not only are you as a service member defending your country, whether it's in a deployment or wherever you are, but you're having to go home and fight for your child. You shouldn't have to do that. Our country should take care of you because you stepped up and are serving the country. And so as far as those gender affirming surgeries for dependents, we're making it way in that path. And Kathy, I know you can probably talk a little bit more about that, but this is one of our key hallmarks of where this partnership started, was to make sure that we address these issues.
Again, we're on it. Two badass EDs that are not going to let our dependents, our military dependents, pay the price of somebody's bad decisions. And I just want to add on the educational piece that the Director of Education, the Secretary of Education, is already working on the new guidance to roll back all the things that the past administration had put in general on education. And so as that gets rolled in, it certainly is going to kind of come over to also including those military bases. So I'm going to open this up. I'd love to kind of, we're getting close to the ending of our time, few more minutes. I'd love to have each one of you touch on this next question of what's something that you want mental health professionals to know about being transgender in the military or about being a dependent of a military person. So whoever wants to start, unmute. And this is a big question, and it's an important question for folks to understand.
Can I go first?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. I love to talk. Can you tell? Something that I think is a really important factor when growing up in a military environment as an LGBTQ person is the factor of shame that is really kind of forced on you from a very young age, that if you aren't perfect, then there's something to be ashamed about. And while you can feel shame in other areas, it is very compounded when you are, raised in a military environment. So mental health professionals, I would urge to really get to the bottom of that and to really encourage the person you're seeing. If you're a therapist, psychiatrist, any kind of mental health professional, get to the bottom of that. And even if you aren't a military, even if you aren't a mental health professional, definitely if you have friends or family or neighbors who have grown up in that environment or even just been heavily involved in that environment, let them know that they have nothing to be ashamed about. Because I spent a lot of my life being ashamed of myself, and it was stifling and awful and suffocating. And then my therapist, actually, Queen, love her, she just said, there's nothing to be ashamed about. You are who you are, and you are a beautiful individual who doesn't deserve to be shamed for that. And I broke down crying, obviously, because it was something that I needed to hear so, so badly. And so I think to just recognize that incredibly strong element of shame will do leaps and bounds for those struggling with mental health issues.
Very powerful, August. Very powerful. Thank you. Who wants to address it next?
I just want to say that I want mental health professionals to understand that we are just as capable as any other person on the street. Okay, number one. The second thing is that once we're congruent with ourselves, once we are whole, okay, we move forward with an efficiency and a drive so much better than we ever did before. I don't know if Jesse and August can back me up on that, but I remember when I came out, when I transitioned, I felt, God, I wish I would have done this 20 years ago, But then again, I never would have had the experiences that I had in the Army and being gifted to lead young men and women for all of those years.
Thanks.
100%.
Jesse?
Yeah, 100%. I'd back that up. I feel like, I've talked to Kathy about this before. I feel like now that I'm serving as my authentic self, I have more time and almost just more energy to put towards, what I do in my day-to-day life, taking care of sailors and taking care of the ship. Really, it kind of just has opened all that headspace to help folks. Another thing I would like for mental health folks to know, it is that being trans is not 100%. It's not all we are, and that's not, in my experience, folks will focus on that during appointments. It'll be all around that. It's a part of the stresses, and it's a part of the challenges that we face every day, but it's not the one and only thing. It is, should be a holistic work stress, other life stressors, rather than just focusing on being trans and stresses.
Absolutely. You know, I have the pleasure of working and the honor of working with so many trans individuals. We've served over 1,000 trans people, and all such amazing people. And I agree totally with you, Jesse. You know, they come to us because they need help with something in their transition, but that's just such a small part of these incredibly resilient folks that, you know, have the passion for living and want to just be able to, you know, kind of move through their transition path a little bit so they can get on with the other things that they have, other parts of them that they want to be able to fully experience, as our friend Paulo. So what would you say to that? What would you like mental health providers to know, Paulo?
You know, coming from, like I said, I'm prior transition, 11 years, coming into a new insurance here when I came to California. I had to experience this, unfortunately, but you know, once we get through that initial start point of transitioning, where the transition it's done. Again, I agree with everybody else. We just want to get past and be us. This is who we are. We don't want to see or go back to the past. That was my past. This is my future. I'm making my future. And that's the biggest thing that I can say. We all have a different journey. There's a beginning and then there's an end. And when that end comes, it's opening a new door for me, for us in general. We're experiencing life in a whole new light, a freedom. It's like a second freedom. And I want to, you know, I don't want to talk about it anymore. And, you know, when I had to go to the new insurance, they wanted to go back to that, make me see more mental, you know, therapists and this and that. And it just didn't make any sense to me to bring up the past when I'm coming to you as the individual I am today. So understand that our stories and our journeys are all different, and we're coming to you at different points in our life. We're not all from the same beginning, you know. And that's it. Like, if you want to talk to us, talk about what our plans are in the future. What are we experiencing now, and how can you make it better for somebody that's going to come, you know, basically behind me. At this point in my life, I'm a tranpa. I'm way into I'm way into, you know, my new freedom and authentic life. And I can't wait to see where I go now. I just can't wait.
Sorry, Paulo. I'm sorry, Paulo.
It's okay.
I think I've got you all beat, okay?
No, I'm just ready. Treat us, just understand we're all different.
And I think that's, you know, that sums it all up of treat us like you would treat everybody else, right? We don't need the shame that August talked about and the differences. Like this is just like everybody else. So I want to say thank you to all of the panelists, and thank you to Jesse and Veronica for your service. And we look forward to the announcement, Paulo. If you are not already following Trans Family Support Services or Modern Military on social media, make sure that you do that. We will definitely be putting a big announcement out for Paulo once all of those things go. And also both organizations will be putting calls to action out. So when we need you to call senators, when we need you to write letters, when we need you to do those sorts of things, that's where you're going to find some of that information. So make sure that you go to our social media, check out our website, fill out the form to be a part of our email list so that you can help to be part of the change for all of these things that we just talked about. So have a great rest of the afternoon. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your participation today.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.